So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about purge ventilation as opposed to continuous flow ventilation. Just give a little presentation on some of the disadvantages and advantages of both kinds. When I started with New Fashion Pork, we purge ventilated everything. And so that's how I was taught. It was the first job I had in a big system like this. They taught me how to do it. I loved it. It was easy for me because that's all I knew. But so purge ventilation, if you don't know, is just using cycle times to get your minimum ventilation by running the fans and then shutting them off, depending on how much air you need. And then you get your calculations done the same. Basically, you take again at old school, I did always the requirements per pound, so I'd go through the math at the number of head times what they needed times the weight they were, to come up with the CFMs that were required. Once you find those CFMs, you divide that by what your fan capacity is to find your percentage of your run time. And so if you needed 30% of your fan per se, the older controllers, they broke on 15 seconds, so we would run the fan for 90 seconds and have it off for 210 seconds. Some advantages of the purge ventilation, you know exactly what your airspeed every time your fan kicks on. Possibly some LP savings. Never really did any scientific studies on that. Fans are always running at 100%, so you don't have to worry about burning fans up if somebody sets them too low or whatnot. And when you were running automatic inlets, there's zero influence from a pressurized attic, because when the fan shut off, all the inlets would close up so you weren't overventilating. Disadvantages, the fans could freeze up seasonally, of course, and we did that. We could manipulate cycle times to that to make sure the fan was kicking on more often so it didn't freeze up. And during the off cycle, there can be a backdraft of air up into the attic, which creates moisture on the roof still, which is causing some rust prematurely if the roof's not insulated and wreaks havoc on that steel. Continuous flow is what we're mostly using now. Again, use your calculations, set your fans to whatever those calculations come up to be. Obviously, you can't run a fan at 30% without risk of burning the motor up or not moving enough air. So when we switched to this, if we couldn't run at 30%, we would unplug a pit fan or shut a pit fan off and just boost the other one to 60% to get what we needed. Advantages that we found on this is there's no updraft in the attic. It's easier to teach new employees. There's less steps in figuring out what you need to do. And if you have the automatic inlets, they're not moving as much, so you don't wear that equipment out quite as fast. Disadvantages, the inlets are open 100% of the time, so if there is a positive pressure in the attic, you could run the risk of overventilating for a short period of time if it's windy out. A lot of times we'll find flat level people on the farms, when they come to the point where they're going to plug that second fan in, they'll forget to readjust their minimum ventilation, so they're running one fan at 75%. They decide that it's time to plug in the second fan, and they plug it in, they walk away, and so then we overventilate until somebody figures out the barn's too cold. So what we do at New Fashion now is we pretty much run all continuous ventilation through the system. We do have some one-off situations here or there. Older traditional nurseries, we have a couple of those that we still purge just because it works better for us. And that's where, on the LP cost, the only scientific information I have on that is we went in there one day and watched the controller for like 10 minutes. One room was continuous, one room was purging, and we watched to see how many times the heaters kicked on. And the purging room ran less heat. Maybe it was a fluke, maybe it wasn't. We never did it again, but it's kind of what we looked at. If we're half stocked on a wean to finish barn, we might purge for a short period of time until we get the barn full, so that we get a little better air quality with it without trying to run the fan too much. And then we have some grow finish sites that don't always ventilate like we think they should. And so sometimes we'll modify our continuous ventilation. We'll run the minimums where they're supposed to be, And if we can't get good air and we're having a little trouble doing that, we can purge in the second stage fan just to give us a quick burst of fresh air every 5 minutes or so. Just kind of clears the gases for us a little bit, makes it a little bit better in there to work. The reason we switched over was to preserve our roof steel. So after years that I was there, then we started to see that a lot of our roof steel was getting rusty prematurely, and figured out that that probably wasn't the best way to do it anymore. And it's also easier to teach, like I said, explain to new employees. At the end of the day, there's really no substitution for paying attention to what the pigs are telling you, whether you're doing continuous, if you're doing purge. The pigs still got to tell you what they need and what you're doing. Is it working or is it not working? Is it making them uncomfortable or not? And that's really all I have. So, thank you.